beyond just the words that people say, which of course could be harmful, I feel like most of the time these labels maybe aren't meant to be harmful. They just could be. Beyond that, there's a meaning that we attach. And she attached a meaning that this was wrong. It was making her less than. Are you ready to live your best life, make healthy choices, have success, have fun, and still have time for everything else? I'm here to teach you how to do that, and we'll all learn together from guests along the way as well. Follow along for some powerful tips on cultivating gratitude, making healthy choices for mind and body, and having fun doing it. What if all the angst and worry actually don't help? Oh my goodness, let's keep learning how to do this differently. OMG, hello my friends. So this week I want to ask you, have you ever had a comment that someone made about you, or an adjective or a couple adjectives that you hear people say about you that just repeat over and over in your head? I can't imagine that the answer would be no. We all have this. We all have these labels that people have given to us, either purposefully or, quite frankly, accidentally. Maybe we were never meant to overhear something and it was said in a heat of the moment kind of situation, and the person maybe never even meant it. We all have these labels, these adjectives that live with us through our lives unless we recognize them and take their power away. So let's talk about how this works and how you can do that. So my story is that I had a few labels hit me when I was a teenager. And quite frankly, it probably started before that, and I just don't remember. And that's one thing about brain development. I'm just going to take a little sidebar here for a second. When we are kids, our brains are very open to input. It's almost as if our subconscious minds are just open with no filter. And as we grow older and we learn to interpret the world, and we either rightly or maybe, I don't want to say wrongly, but we either do it well or we do it sort of with a skew against ourselves, we start to interpret the world and we make decisions about what we hear and what we see. As we get older, not everything can make its way into our subconscious brain. But as a child, we get imprinted with so many things that people have said about us or things that have happened to us and the way we've interpreted them. So a lot of times, if you have had adjectives like shy or silly or loud or whatever always following you through your life, it probably came from when you were younger. So that probably is true of me as well. I'm going to tell you a couple anecdotes. I'm going to tell you some listener input that we got about this topic. And at the same time, I fully recognize that I'm sure that there are things that I don't remember, because when I was in elementary school, I loved to read. And I don't know why I'm saying when I was in elementary school, I still love to read. I will always love to read. And I was a very good reader. And so I was in like the extra reading group, or the, Brown level, or I don't know, we had SRA back then. Those of you that grew up in the 70s know what I'm talking about. But that gave me a label of either being a nerd or smart, or I don't know what people said about me, because I don't remember, because my best friend was in my group with me, so I wasn't too worried about it. But I'm sure there's stuff hidden in there related to this. What I do remember that labeled me and really stuck with me a lot longer than I should have let it is that in my family, I was kind of labeled along with my sibling, and I'll let he or she keep some anonymity with this. One of us was labeled by others, just kind of in a joking way, the smart one, and one of us was labeled the pretty one. And it doesn't even matter who was labeled what. Those are both harmful, because if you give two siblings different labels, then they automatically ask what? They automatically ask, why don't I have the other label? So the smart one is thinking, well, am I ugly? Like, what the heck? Now I feel undesirable. And the pretty one, I'm doing air quotes, is thinking, well, am I dumb? What the heck? I thought I was smart. Spoiler alert, I say we're both. But anyway, that's a label that stuck with us for a while until we realized it was ridiculous. And we both, I think, have realized that in our lives. Now, another thing that happened, and I feel fairly sure that this was not intended to stick with me for a long time, but another thing that happened, just to, give give you the lay of the land of why we want to talk about this subject is that I was dating someone during high school, and this was not an extensive amount of dating, but after a couple of dates, he said to me something along the lines of, "I'm so glad I didn't know how smart you were, or I never would have asked you out." I'm just going to give you a little moment to think about that. He said it, I'm still fairly sure, as a compliment. Not a compliment, maybe, but as a thank goodness, isn't this so great? And now that I say it out loud, I can find it funny, but I will tell you that that got hidden in my head for many, many years. And it wasn't until probably 20 years after that happened that I kind of pulled it back up out of my memory. I don't even know how. And I went, oh my goodness, I think I internalized this for 20 years. So what does that say? And let me give you a little foreshadowing. We have an episode coming soon on OMG Teach Me about teaching girls to go for success in the corporate world, because that's a big, big topic. And that's kind of where this comment led me to. Am I not allowed to be smart? Who defines what too smart is? Good heavens. Every time I went to the next level of schooling, I was a smaller fish in a bigger pond. So there's no too smart about it. And secondly, why would you tell someone, wow, I never would have asked you out if I had known this thing about you? Needless to say, we are not dating. I am not married to him. And I think he meant it in a positive way. And so the reason I give that illustration is because sometimes people say things that are not meant to be hurtful. I'm sure I've done it. I have two kids who are both in their 20s. I'm sure during their lives, I have made comments that I did not certainly mean to be hurtful, maybe even meant to be positive, and that is not the way they were taken. And I do joke with my kids, and I don't know that they find it funny anymore because I've said this so many times, but I do joke with my kids, I'm sure we're screwing you up in some way. That's what parents do, but we're trying our best. We're trying to do better than what we recognize may have happened in previous families, in previous generations, in other situations. We're trying to improve. But I know that we all have an effect on each other. So it could be that there is something in your mind that someone meant as a positive thing. Someone maybe even meant as a compliment, telling you, oh my goodness, you're always the most organized one. And somehow your brain took it as, I must be too straight-laced, or why am I so type A? And that's not what they meant at all. One listener was telling me that, we're going to say she, I don't know who this was. It was anonymous feedback, but let's say she was always labeled as shy and quiet. And this is just a way that she was described by her parents, by teachers, peers, even strangers as she was growing up. I definitely resonate with this, and maybe you do too, because there are situations in which I'm shy. And those are not situations you might imagine. For me, anyway, I love speaking to a big group. I love teaching to a classroom. Obviously, I'm here on a podcast talking to you. However, one-on-one, I do get shy sometimes, or I do get quiet. That's fine. We can all have personality traits. However, if you are hearing this feedback from all over the place as you're growing up and as you're kind of finding your identity, it can kind of distort things for you. And what this listener said is that it completely distorted her self-image and her self-esteem because she always felt like it was said in a negative sense. And there it is. So beyond just the words that people say, which of course could be harmful, I feel like most of the time these labels maybe aren't meant to be harmful. They just could be. Beyond that, there's a meaning that we attach. And she attached a meaning that this was was wrong. It was making her less than. It's like me attaching a meeting to this too smart comment. I guess that makes me less desirable. That was my interpretation. And I have a hard time not going with that interpretation. That's my slant on the comment. So she said that this whole shy and quiet thing made her want to prove people wrong. So sometimes we kind of fall into the trap. We just go with the labels. I'm going to own it. I'm just going to be the most freaking organized person there is. I'm going to be the class clown. If you're going to call me the class clown, let's do this thing. She went the other way. The other way we might go when we get these labels is to try to prove people wrong, to kind of rebel against the label. It's not really rebelling against a person typically, but rebelling against that description. And so she went out of her way to be really outgoing, to be impulsive, to be rebellious, even to be the life of the party. And she said that was a plot twist that didn't go well and didn't last. So in the end, this listener said, even though she's more naturally reserved with people she's not comfortable with, or when she first meets people, that doesn't take away from who she is as a person or what she has to offer. And what a fabulous lesson. We could almost stop this episode right now. We're not going to because I have some productive things that hopefully will help you, but that's where we have to get to, is to say people can say what they say or think what they think. That doesn't matter. I get to choose how I am, who I am, how I act, who I believe myself to be. And that is the most important thing. Another thing that happened to me, and you'll gather that I was a very good student. I'm not trying to say that I was, again, like the top of everything. I went to bigger and bigger ponds and became a smaller and smaller fish. But anyway, I was most likely to succeed in high school. And I went back to a high school reunion, and I don't remember which reunion this was, but 20 or 30 years later, I think it was. So yes, I'm aging myself. I went back to a reunion after a long time, and I had two different people say to me some variation of this, a little different from each. But basically, what company are you the president of now? I think you should be running the world. Weren't you most likely to succeed? And I am perfectly happy with what I'm doing in life. I have goals. I haven't hit them yet. And at the same time, I have had multiple amazing careers that I have been really good at. So I have no issues about being unhappy with where I am in my professional life. I am fully on board with where my path has taken me. And at the same time, that kind of comment just sort of yanks all the worry and, I don't know, lack of self-esteem back to where it might have been in the past. Who were they to say what I should be doing with my life? Maybe I didn't want to be the president of a company. I didn't. I wanted to do other things. So these things happen. And it doesn't have to be most likely to succeed. It could be, like I mentioned earlier, class clown. Let's say that you went through school and you have a great sense of humor and you love to make jokes, but you feel like you do it at appropriate times. This is what another listener said to me. I don't see a problem with making jokes, making people laugh. I do it when it's appropriate. I don't do it when it's completely the wrong time. And that being said, I was labeled the class clown in my senior superlatives from high school. This is my listener telling me this. And that has stuck with me. It's as if everyone thought, this person said, that I would just go on to achieve nothing because I could have no professional goals besides just acting like an idiot. And quite frankly, I think we realize as adults that a sense of humor is an amazing, amazing thing. And if we have a sense of humor, we are better off than anyone who doesn't. Making people laugh, and let me just pause and say, this is like, I'm going to have to make another episode out of this too. Making people laugh is so powerful to cut through stress, to cut through awkwardness, to just even have a laugh at yourself and put everyone on an even playing field about the way they feel about a situation that you're in, whatever it might be. A sense of humor is a huge, huge, huge benefit. So what a shame that this person took a long time to figure that out and be able to put that label aside. Over the past few years, as a network marketer, I wanted an authentic way that I could focus on the power of mindset and being myself and create a business. And I found the Social Selling Academy with Kristen Boss. I have learned so much about social selling and direct selling. And if you think that would be great for you too, go to www.bit.ly/SSAOMG and grab your $100 off link there. I had another listener say that, we're going to call her a she. She was always labeled or described as ditzy, flighty, and too much, an airhead. And I said to her, well, what effects did that have on you? And she almost found it hard to answer. She said, terrible. If you have been described in this way, then certainly you feel this. If you haven't, think about it. If you're going through your life at no matter what age you are, knowing, and the only way you would know this, I suppose, is to overhear occasionally. I don't know if people would say something about you being ditzy to your face, but hey, maybe they would. But knowing that that's what people thought of you. She's flighty. He's just too much. He's an airhead. She's ditzy. Knowing that if they had to choose someone to put their faith in, to get something done or to make a decision, they probably weren't coming to you. That's hard until you decide, you know what? That's other people's labels. I'm going to figure out who I want to be. And that takes some maturity and it takes some real mindset work to get there, which is what we're going to talk about in the second part of the episode today. Now, again, calling her she also said that she was labeled as sweet, enthusiastic, creative, fun, joyful, and all of those things sound fantastic. On the other hand, sometimes it was hard to be that. You can't always be fun. You can't always be joyful. We have down days. So again, other people's labels can feel very confining. Other people's labels can make us feel like we have to act a certain way, either to completely obliterate those labels or to fall in line. Or they just plant a seed in our minds that almost leads always to self-sabotage, and we don't even totally know why. And to be honest with you, that's what that I would have never asked you out if I knew how smart you were comment did to me for a long time. Was it not okay to be me? Is it not okay to be smart? Obviously, that's not true. One person said it, and I took it in for years. So if you are thinking to yourself, one person said something to me, I can't believe I took it in for years. Maybe you're on the path to healing from that. Maybe you're just now realizing it's time to heal from that, or maybe you already have. Be kind to yourself because this happens to all of us. And maybe the ones that really kick, the ones that really hit us, are the ones that already hit on something that maybe we weren't very secure about. Maybe they hit on something that we already wanted to change about ourselves. And when somebody else labels that, it just kind of sinks it into concrete. Yes, this is a thing that is wrong with me, and it's a thing I need to change about myself. And that's not really fair. Number one, we can be who we want to be. Number two, we get to decide. So let's talk about how these things become so important. I am doing a leadership coaching certification right now, and there were two things that came up that we were talking about in that course recently that I really realized maybe would be helpful with this topic. So there is something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it looks like a triangle, basically. It reminds me of the healthy eating pyramid thing or whatever. But anyway, our basic needs are physiological and safety. So we want to have food, shelter, clothing. We need to be able to survive, right? Safety would mean we need to have income. We need to have a paycheck, the resources to be able to live. We want to have health. All those things are our basic needs. But do you know what comes next? Next is the psychological needs. And those are belonging and esteem. And so we have this inherent need to belong with our family, with our friends, with a community. We need a connection. And sometimes these labels feel like a judgment that could isolate us from that connection, that could kick us out of the cool group, for example. And that hits to the core of a basic need that humans have. This is what our brains are looking for. And then you have esteem, kind of in the same category, meaning respect respect, recognition, being able to accomplish things. Well, if we're being recognized for something that our brain is telling us is negative, that's the opposite of this need for esteem. And the last one is self-fulfillment, personal growth, which of course is what we all want to be striving for. But think about it this way. If we don't feel esteemed, and if we don't feel like we're being recognized for the positives about ourselves, and we don't feel like we belong in the group that we want to be in, of the type of people we want to belong with, we're never going to get past that. That's that basic need. Now, there is also something that I coach with my business partners in our network marketing business on quite a lot. And I really love this illustration. Again, interestingly, it's a triangle. So we call it the motivational triad. So our brains want three things. So these are each at the vertex of the triangle. You could tell I was a math teacher. One of them is to avoid pain. So I don't want to have to be uncomfortable. My brain does not want that. It wants to be on the couch, under the Snuggie, being comfortable, right? My brain also, the second one, wants to seek pleasure, wants to have fun. And the third one, my brain wants to conserve energy, minimize effort. So this is what the brain is always looking for. And when we get labeled, sometimes that's bringing pain, because again, it might be that somebody almost accidentally went to the heart of something we're worried about for ourselves. It's the opposite of having pleasure. Now we're desperately trying to avoid pain. We're going to have to expend some energy. So sometimes in order to conserve energy and to avoid further pain, we just let these labels define us. And that's no blame on us. That's our brain. Avoid pain, seek pleasure, conserve energy. So let's flip it around this way. What if we get to decide the labels we want? Adjectives are just words. I want you to ask yourself, what adjectives would you like to have when somebody describes you? You don't want to be described as shy and quiet. You don't want to be described as smart or nerdy. You don't want to be described as too organized. Well, what do you want to be described as? Sit down for a minute in a quiet space, maybe put on the Mood Lift playlist on Spotify and just brainstorm. Or maybe go and Google adjectives. Look at a list of adjectives. Pick some out. I'm not kidding. Sometimes we need those cues to think about, how do I want to show up in the world? Who do I want to be? Because you do have a personality and you are yourself and you get to be your best self. So what adjectives describe your best self? Are you fun? Do you have a great sense of humor? That's a good thing, even though my one listener had some struggles with that one. Are you serious? Are you always around to help? Are you giving? Whatever you want to be, make a list. Sit down and envision being thrilled with your life, thrilled with your relationships, and thrilled with your professional successes. How would you describe that version of you? Let yourself feel good emotions about being this version of you that embodies all of those things. Now, if this is a tough activity, which I fully realize that it might be hard to see yourself as the person that you desperately want to be, because maybe there's a bit of resistance in there that we've talked about on earlier episodes, maybe not believing that we can really be that person. There's a couple things you can do. Go back and listen to last week's episode on tapping. I have used tapping to kind of clear some of the negative stuff inside of me about labels that people have given me, some of the ones that I've mentioned. Interestingly, again, underscoring my point that we want to choose our own adjectives. Now, sometimes in my life, people think of me as too outspoken. As the bossy one. And it used to be super quiet and maybe shy around people. So who the heck knows? We choose our adjectives. If you are stuck on this, what about a personality assessment or a strengths assessment? Something like that could help as a starting point. You can choose then to emphasize the traits you like, to find the positive parts. So what am I thinking about? I'm thinking about the Strengths Finder. I'm pretty sure you can find these online, and you can do a little quiz, and then you can read about the results you get. I'm thinking of the Enneagram. I know my Enneagram number. I think eventually I'll do an episode on Enneagram. It's pretty fascinating. There's so many different personality and strengths assessments out there you can do. We're going to be talking on an episode soon about human design, which is another one that gives you insight into ways that you can become someone who's really kind of living exactly as they want to live. So stay tuned. That's coming next week. Find one of these assessments, figure out what your strengths are. Don't worry about the weaknesses. Don't worry about the basement traits, I've heard it called. Look at your strengths and ask yourself, how can you enjoy being a person who uses those strengths? Describe yourself with words related to those strengths that you like. Write them down. Read them often. What I really want you to do is create a description of yourself that you got to make. You get to make it. You get to decide. And then maybe, just maybe, when you get hit with memories of labels that aren't what you wanted, or you get hit with current comments about labeling you with things that aren't what you want, call up this list you created. Call up the feelings of being this person who has these amazing strengths and feel it. Know that you get to choose who you are. I get to choose who I am. And this is changeable. A few years down the road, you decide you want to tweak it a little bit. You're going in a different direction with your life. You're going to emphasize sort of a different part of your personality. Do it. Other people don't get to label us. They can do it in private, but they don't get to label us and make it mean something to us. We get to label us. And I'll leave you with this. One of my favorite quotes, and I don't know who to attribute this to. I have heard it at trainings many times from many different people. And that is, other people's opinions of me are none of my business. So go ahead and create a picture of yourself that you love, because what other people are labeling us is none of our business. I hope this helps you as you go out into the world and be the best version of you. I sure hope you enjoyed today's episode. OMG, I would be so honored if you would take a moment, leave a rating, and leave a review. Let's get this message out further into the world. Make sure you've subscribed as well, and why not grab a screenshot and share it on your social media. Now it's time to head down to the show notes and see the resources I mentioned. Go find what you love.